I love stories. I love stories in pretty much every medium that they can be told. But I really enjoy books, TV shows, and video games as my favorite medium to tell those fictional stories that we can tell, right? So one thing though that I've been thinking about lately is the new landscape that we're in. And whenever I find myself unsure about, where I want video gaming to go, I like to sometimes take a look at the other side and see how other mediums are wrestling with their challenges. And one of the pitfalls that I saw looking specifically at the filmmaking side, whether that is movies or TV shows, is that Hollywood has a problem letting things go. They have a problem letting things end, you know? And there is two different kind of aspects of the problem. The first is going to be that they simply won't let franchises die. There's always some kind of remaster, some kind of remake, some kind of reboot of a franchise, no matter how popular or how unpopular it was at the time. If there's just a little bit of IP recognition behind it, they're going to try to make a reboot or remaster of it. I mean, cluing all of the Disney live action remakes that nobody asked about, Yet somehow these things make so much money. I don't understand, right? And then the second problem is simply franchises that went on for way too long, okay? And I'm going to name a few. You're going to agree with me that generally speaking, as a general rule of thumb, these TV shows, because I'm specifically going to talk about TV shows, should only have received about half the number of seasons that they actually received. Okay, let me give you some names: How I Met Your Mother, The Big Bang Theory, Two and a Half Men, Glee, Family Guy, The Simpsons, Once Upon a Time, Friends, Modern Family, and let's go to the big daddy of them all, The Walking Dead. You see, what you will, I'm sure you agree with me because this is like, we all know this to be true. All of these things would have been better had they been about at least half the season length, half the series length, or even shorter. The specific case that I want to discuss a little bit further is going to be Supernatural. So, Supernatural was created by Eric Kripke, and he had as an idea a 5 season show. He had this very like tight focused idea that there were going to be these two brothers and that they were going to fight ghosts while looking for their dad, but supernatural entities while looking for their dad. And that they were going to be thrown into this world where they find out there's more and more dangerous things and the stakes are getting higher and higher and higher until they culminate in literally fighting the devil himself, right? Fighting Lucifer. That was his thing, right? They're eventually going to climax right there, and then the series will be over. Okay, cool. Here's the thing though, he actually got to do it. He actually got to execute his vision, and then at season 5, season finale was intended to be the series finale. And yet the greedy corporations saw how popular this was, and at season 5 it was the height of his popularity, and they just wouldn't let it die. So despite his best intentions, they went ahead, but he didn't want any part of it because his vision had been completed, and he was happy and satisfied with the work they had put forward. So he said, if you're going to make another season of this, I'm not going to be a part of it. And they were like, yep, you can go away. So that is a big issue going through Hollywood, even at this modern day. There are so many things, that are just coming back from the dead or they're just refusing to die altogether, right? And it's bad. Bringing it to video games. I was thinking about the trilogy versus the duology. In 20, what is it, 2020 something, when we were first getting the revelations of what God of War Ragnarok was going to be, there was a surprising bit of a twist because essentially the game runners, said that they made this into a duology because they didn't want to take 10 years to tell the story. They didn't want to be such a large gap between when the story first began in 2018 to when it will eventually finish in some unknown future that could take 10 plus years to tell because they just didn't think the story was worth that. And at the time it surprised me, but now here in 2025, I can respect that decision. I think to myself, what would they have done as an in between thing to then kind of keep the Ragnarok aspect as the final confrontation? But then, if you made that the final confrontation, would I really be able to hold down an entire game without getting overly cumbered and everything? And I understand that for a lot of people, the final battle in God of War Ragnarok felt rushed. I can understand that. I can understand when people say that the game had pacing issues. I can understand the criticism. But at the end of the day, I need to respect. I feel the respect for the premise that they showed, for the idea, for the dedication to the story, and to try to do the best thing for the story. Because now we are living in a world that is quite different from the PS3 generation. During the PS3 generation, we could have a game come out and with its two sequels, like have the complete trilogy within about 6 years. Nowadays, you'll be lucky if you get a second game within those 6 years. So if it takes 5 years to make a game now, I think we also kind of have to adapt the length or the kind of ways that we tell the stories that we take, you know? So I'm putting it to you guys. Let me know what you think. I think that now duologies should be more common. So either I propose either your game be a one-off story, just going to have a single game, or at most have two games, two story, have a duology, and then that's it. Finish there. Because I also want studios to move on from IP. If we take a look at The Last of Us Part 2, I feel conflicted because I always felt that Ellie's arc always needed to have a final redemption for both her and Joel. To be able to say, like, okay, in this final game, our main driving force is that we have found yet another way to create to create a cure from Ellie's blood or Ellie's brain matter or whatever. And so in this final chapter of the story, that would be the main driving force, sort of harkening back to what The Last of Us Part 1 was about. You know, we were taking this girl across the country, but it kind of had this promise that if we do this, if we manage this, we might be able to make a viable cure or a viable vaccine for humanity. That to me brought so much hope in such a bleak world. In The Last of Us Part 2, one of the things that just felt so emotionally heavy is that you know that the story isn't about that. And so for me, losing Ellie in The Last of Us Part 2 always felt scary, not for her specifically, not necessarily from just my love of the character, but for the world as a whole, because you know that they would have wasted, their opportunity to actually figure this out, right? To actually let people be immune. That would have been such a shame to just kill this random girl to them and then never realize that within her held everything that they could ever wish for, an actual cure or vaccine for the infection. I just feel like her story needs to have that final moment. But then again, her game, her idea, her story origin came out in the PS3 generation. So maybe she gets to break the rule because she kind of came ages ago. But if we think about Intergalactic, let's say that Intergalactic is phenomenal, right? Do you guys really wanted Intergalactic 3? Right? Like, do you get what I mean by that? Like, does that kind of sound tiresome, kind of bothersome, right? I'm very glad, for example, that Ghost of Tsushima, Jin's story is done. Ghost of Yote, I also expect to just be a single game. I think Clear Obscure Expedition 33 as a one game, perfect. Absolutely perfect. There's no reason for that game to be a trilogy, for example. When I think about Intergalactic, I could see Intergalactic and Intergalactic Part 2, and then that would be everything that they have to tell. But I do think that the video gaming world needs to avoid the pitfalls of the Hollywood world because, I mean, we haven't done it perfectly. Take a look at Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed, I think all of us would accept, should have just ended when Desmond died, right? Or at least you have gone on a massive hiatus. Like, imagine if, I think it was Assassin's Creed Revelations or 3 where he dies, one of those two. I think it's Revelations where he dies. And then imagine if we had a huge break, no game in between, no Black Flag, no Assassin's Creed Unity, none of those in between until Assassin's Creed Origins. I think bringing it back many years later would have had that kind of God of War 2018 resurgence, renew the fan base, and be like, this is Assassin's Creed for the new generation, right? I think that would have made it a very stellar return to form. So I think that generally speaking, we need to avoid the first problem that Hollywood has, which is we never let franchises die. I think that is just a very lazy way, a very creatively bankrupt way to keep making money off a property that just takes so long. And then the second thing is that if we do tell a brand new story that is compelling, we need to write it at the beginning to either be told in a single game or at most in just two games. Because we need to be cognizant of the fact that games are not coming out as quickly as they used to. There's so much more that's going into video games. And I just think that there's going to be a longer and longer stretch of time. And honestly, these creatives can give us so many more stories, so many more interesting takes, so many more interesting concepts that we should give them the ability to just move on once a story is told. So, I guess that's my idea. There's many like discussion points that I can even have in my own head. For example, GTA 6 is the sixth entry into the GTA series. So, in one side, the story, the franchise isn't, dead. It's they're not letting it die. But then on the other side, there's been such a huge gap between GTA 5 and GTA 6 that it kind of fits my model of if you're not going to let the franchise end, you should take a break from it for 10 to 12 years. But then they have GTA Online. So did they really not let it end? Whereas you take a look at Red Dead Redemption 1 and Red Dead Redemption 2, and I feel like the two work well together because of how much of a time gap there is. Just technology wise, it just feels like a really different experience between the two, if you understand what I mean. So I find it interesting. I think there's many pieces to this conversation, but I do think that erring on the side of let's have a tighter, more focused experience, even if that experience sometimes is hampered or a little bit hurt by the fact that it's just in two games, right? It's better than having a game franchise that is renewed for, game one, game two, game three, game four, game five, game six. Or maybe do something like Final Fantasy does, where there are individual stories that are contained and told all by themselves, and then each other entry in the franchise is completely different. It'd be like Ghost of Tsushima to Ghost of Yote. There is some continuity between the two, but they are each individually told stories. So maybe that is also an interesting option. Anyways, it's all about telling better stories. Let me know what you think. I'm actually interested in what you have to say for this one because I just think that it's an interesting concept. We are coming into a situation now where I'm advocating further and further for the PlayStation 5 generation to go on longer because so many of these studios haven't even had the chance to release their kind of like magnus opus for this generation yet. Like if you take a look at Horizon, the Gorilla's Horizon franchise, even though Forbidden West is a wonderful game to me, it's still not the magnus opus on the PS5 generation because it was not created for the ground up to be on this console's hardware. It was created for the PS4. So then, you know, i- if we have a let's say if we have a PlayStation 6 in 2028, are we going to get the next final part of Horizon trilogy by then? Or is it going to be a cross generation game that is really kind of a PS5 game, but it's better for you to play on the PS6 game, and they never really got to make a game just for the PS5? I don't know. These are just things that are going on in my mind. Let me know what you think. We'll talk about it in the comments. And yeah, I'm interested because normally I like to try to make my thoughts when I have fairly solidified them. But this time I thought, let me just share it pretty much as soon as it comes and it starts forming itself in my mind. So you have a chance to influence how I think going forward. Let me know.